Good morning. I'm going to teach a skill today that I was recording to actually share with somebody else. And I thought, why not also put this on YouTube? So you're just going to jump right in with me, like you kind of already have some basic knowledge. This is going to be called part two, container. It goes with part one, butterfly tapping. So if you haven't watched the part one butterfly tapping, you can go to the YouTube channel homepage for me, and it says part one, butterfly tapping. And so that's the basic skill you'll need to go along with today, part two, container. So, a lot of people are familiar with the idea of compartmentalization. We talk about, like, I suppress that all the time. I've compartmentalized it. I've put it in a box somewhere else. And usually, when people are saying that, they are kind of referencing like avoidance, right? Like, I'm putting it over here and I'm not dealing with it. And in fact, it's in a rusty old box or a broken down cardboard box in my mental closet that I don't even look in and it's got cobwebs on it, right? Like, I've put that crap away and I don't want anything to do with it. And so, container is a little different. Container is like if you've watched the home edit. I don't know if you guys know, it's been for a long time ago, but the home edit, right? And it's where you like go through all the stuff in your house and you decide like what do you keep, what do you donate, what needs a repair, what can you like trash, what all that stuff, right? And I think of container as a similar concept for our emotional and physical, even sensational kind of stuff that's going on. And so we all have a lot of stuff that we go through every day, right? We have thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations, triggers, things that our brain maybe picks up on and we don't even know what it all is. And as we're moving through the day, you can't stop to address every single thing you experience, right? Maybe I'm triggered in a work meeting and it's not appropriate for me to stop and feel my feelings and cry if I need to cry and process it with my boss. What if it's not a safe place, but also is it professional, right? So I put it away, put in my compartmentalization in my crusty box, right? And so I'm going to teach you how to do it in a more like nervous system informed, maybe even neurologically informed way, and allow you to come back to it later. And so how I explain it is it's like taking a mindful approach to gently placing something, setting aside, kind of like a parking lot, right? Setting aside and saying, I'm going to come back to it later. And so when you come back to it later, you're doing it in a thoughtful way. We're not doing it in a suppressed, I don't want to have anything to do with it way. I often say to clients that my example of compartmentalization is like, you're 15 years old, it's Friday night, you want to go hang out with your friends, and your mom says, not till you clean your room, right? So you're like, go upstairs, I've got 5 minutes or I'm going to be late. So I shove my shit under the bed and I shove it in the closet. And there's like Big Mac wrappers in there, dirty underwear, trash, all sorts of things, soda bottles. You just shove it shut and you're like, Mom, my room's clean. And she's like, okay, right? That's compartmentalization emotionally. What happens when you start to smell something weird in your room, right? Something's not right here. Now I got to clean out this closet and I find all sorts of trash that's in here. That's kind of what happens in our body and our nervous system when we just compartmentalize. We shove everything away and a trigger comes through and it all comes tumbling back out, right? All of a sudden we get flooded. Maybe later in the day, we're letting our stuff out on somebody else and it's a carryover, right? It's like, I actually had a really hard time in my meeting today and work was really tough. And now I'm yelling at my dog and I'm yelling at my kid and it's got nothing to do with them, but I didn't contain and I didn't appropriately cope. I just shoved back in my compartments and it's all flooding in, right? So this is a healthier strategy to help you be more mindful, be more aware of what's happening in your body, and also sensory based. I'll give you the strategies. So what we want to do is create a container in our mind, right? And so in our mind, we can access anything, anytime, right? A lot of times the brain and the nervous system are very good at accessing stressful and intrusive things any point at any time, right? Like it makes sense. It's to protect us. And so we have to teach it that part of the way to protect us is healthier coping skills as well, right? So I'm going to guide you through this. It's going to be a little bit different than like in session. I get feedback from clients about what things look like. I'm not going to get feedback from you, obviously. So I'm just going to kind of workshop it and make it more like a skill builder. Okay. So let's take a minute and settle in. I'm going to take a sip of water and let you settle into your seat. You're going to go ahead and close your eyes. And in your mind's eye, I'd like for you to pull up a container that is large enough and strong enough to hold any disturbing thing you can imagine. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. And now that you've got the container in your mind, I want you to really kind of turn it around like a 360 analysis. It's floating in the air. How do things open and shut? How do things get in there? How do you make sure you can get things in and out of your container without everything flying out at once? So I want you to think about the opening and closing mechanisms of your container. I'm just giving you some time to think about that. And is it important that you be able to see into your container? Or is it not see-through, right? Like maybe it's made of material you can't see through or it's cloudy. Is it important for you to be able to see to make sure all of your things are staying in there? Or is it once it goes in the container, I don't want to see it? And either answer is fine. You just need to know for you what's the best fit. And then if you're to open your container and peek inside, what is that process like? Is it clunky? Is it smooth, right? Is your container comfy inside for all of your uncomfortable experience or disturbing things that we want to hold in that space till we can come back to it, right? Is it comfy enough for things to stay in there? And this is maybe that transition point of like compartmentalization in the yucky box on the shelf versus like, I'm thoughtfully holding these things. It's okay. I have experiences that need to be held. How do I make sure my container is a comfortable and safe space for things to stay? So I want you to imagine what elements of your container you may need for that. Is there a lid? Is there a lock? What color is it? What's the inside like? And then I want for you to remember, because this is created in your mind's eye, it can get bigger if you need it to get bigger, because sometimes we might move things to the container and feel overwhelmed, like it's not big enough. Okay, it's kind of like clip art. Grab the corner and drag it larger. Your brain has the capacity to make it bigger if it needs to. And so sometimes that limiting thought can come in because we get overwhelmed. So I want to remind you of that. Okay, I'm going to give a couple more seconds. Consult my little script here and make sure. Okay, so next I'm going to give you a little example, and then I'm going to explain how to do it sensory. Again, this in session would be much more interactive. We'd use personal experiences and we wouldn't have to go through everything, but we have to hear because I don't know what you have. So I use Burt's Bees chapstick. I just do, well, it's not called chapstick, brands, whatever. So I use this. So we're going to practice with this because it's small, it's innocuous, it should be pretty easy, right? So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, bring up your container in your mind's eye. Also bring up an image of my Burt's Bees in your mind's eye and move it to your container. And how did that go? Often it can be pretty easy, right? If not, maybe there's some other work we have to do before we move on. But we're going to proceed as though moving that was pretty easy. So you got to see what it was like to draw up a visual representation of a physical image and move it to the container, right? That was easy. Next, we're going to go through the senses, right? And I like to give examples of how we might move different things to the container. Say you're having a negative memory or a negative image come up and it's disturbing to you. How do you move an entire memory to the container, right? I might need a way to make a physical representation of it. So in my mind's eye, I'm having this replay happen, I might pick the most disturbing point of the memory and act as though I'm taking a Polaroid, if you remember what Polaroids are, or a screenshot, something that I can physically hold in my hand. And then I might move that to the container. So we're not going to practice this right now in this exact experience because it could get pretty lengthy. But, I might take a Polaroid and a screenshot and move it to the container, right? Maybe I had a text exchange with somebody that was stressful. So I might imagine moving my whole phone to the container. Um, we also can talk about smells, right? Sometimes people might have smells from traumatic experiences or even just things that make them not feel well, like in pregnancy, right? Like stuff like that can be really overwhelming as well. So you're like, I smell something, it reminds me that my body has a response, right? So for smells, you can visualize what the specific smell is if you know, like the smell of onions cooking. So I might visualize like a pot with onions cooking and move that to the container, like I'm setting that aside, right? Maybe we need to bottle something up to look like it's an essential oil, a cologne, a perfume bottle, like maybe those ones with the cool little spritz, if you remember from back in the day. But that might be a way to move a smell to the container. As far as sounds, there's representations of sounds, right? Like you might be like, that sound of like the dog barking. I can very specifically imagine moving a dog representation to the container, a dog stuffy, maybe a video of the dog barking, right? Something like that. Maybe you could move the whole dog to the container in your mind's eye, but often that's a little harder to do. So you might figure out what is a representation of the sound. There's also sound from traumatic experiences, right? The idea of moving those to the container can be a little more difficult, right? It's kind of an abstract concept. So you might visualize a recording of sound. And what would that look like? Maybe I have a recording of sound on a tape recorder. Maybe I have a recording of the sound on like a handheld iPad or something like that. And so I imagine it playing and pausing and playing and pausing. And I move that to the container because now I have a physical representation of it. I can also turn down sound. So you might imagine what it would be like to turn it down or change the channel if it's on like a TV, right? But some physical representation of sound and moving that to the container. What else did we did? Smell, vision, sound, taste. Taste is kind of like smell, right? Sometimes there's something very literal and you can imagine what that is and move to the container. Sometimes it might be like in a traumatic experience, you have a taste of like the adrenaline or something like that. And so you might represent what it would like literally be like to spit into a vial, keep it, like put a lid on it and move it to the container. Be like, I'm putting this representation of what this moment is to the container. So I think we've covered 4 of the 5 senses. The last is touch. There's a couple different ways you can do that one. Again, very literal in the same way of like smell and taste might be. You can manufacture what the representation is and move it. Like I don't like the feeling of um, like a certain texture on my skin. I might imagine moving that to the container. But touch can also be an inside sensation that's experienced in your body. And so I want to take a minute to teach you that experience, okay? I am going to teach you what I call the like crystal ball or magic ball. And so a lot of us that are going to be watching this are probably like in our 30s or something. So we probably remember in the 90s the like crystal balls and stuff like that that people had that are could hold in your hand, like the witches. I'm thinking of like the movie the movie Robin Hood, right? And so, in the crystal ball, what you would do is we're going to use this as the tool for moving sensations. Okay. And so I'm going to walk you through a little meditative experience about what that looks like. So remember, we've done all the other senses, and then this is for kind of the inside experience of feelings and sensations in our body, which is a little different than touch. Okay. So I'm going to invite you to practice it now to use later. So you're going to close your eyes and you're going to imagine in front of you that your hands are held out together and there's a ball in your hands that's a crystal ball or like a glass ball. And it has no color to it, but you can see that there's energy swirling inside of it, just movement and things like that. And what you're going to do is you're going to scan your body from the tip of your head and the tips of your toes, going inward to your core, noticing whatever sensations and experiences you have occurring, and drawing them inward to the center of your body. So things are moving from top down to the center and bottom up to the center. And you might start to feel some warmth in the center of your body. And you imagine the energy swirling and moving, and they start to spread up towards your shoulders. They come down your arms to your fingertips. This energy starts spilling into the crystal ball that's holding in your hands. And you're noticing as that energy is pouring into the crystal ball, it starts to swirl, swirling, taking on speed. You might notice different shimmers and glimmers, different colors changing. And it's just emptying into this ball. As you notice all that energy and the speed picking up in the ball, you notice the energy from your body feeling less intense, less heat, less heavy. You might feel more neutral as things pour into your body. You might have a feeling or a emotion you name for this ball and this energy that's moving in, and you might not. Both are okay. But as you're looking at the ball, you notice the color is starting to change. And I want you to name out loud for yourself what color you're experiencing and if there's an emotion to go along with it. And when it feels like that's emptied out enough, I want you to imagine what it feels like to open your container and move this ball to the container for later. Now, some people need a little ramp, boop, roll it down in. Some people have talked about having like a mechanism that rises up, like kind of like at the bowling alley. You set it on there and it goes back down. Some people can walk right over and set it in. And remember, the container can change and shift in any way you need to hold whatever you need because this is your container that your mind has created. So I want you to take a minute to think about what would need to happen to move that over. If we were doing this together in session, we'd have more time for that. We also would have the opportunity for you to revisit and do another ball if you needed to for other feelings or other sensations you're experiencing. Sometimes people want to say that physical sensations shouldn't move to the container because maybe they have chronic pain or something like that. And while that is true, and like the psychology of moving something to the container isn't going to eliminate a chronic condition, there can still be an alleviation sometimes of sensations, emotions, and tension, along with or that pairs with whatever experience you may have. So it's worth a try. And if you try it and it isn't successful, that's okay. You haven't lost anything. But if it helps a little bit or alleviates something, then you have another tool in your pocket. So you're welcome to revisit that with that mindset, trying that perspective about other sensations you might be experiencing as well. So you're moving that to the container. And if we were doing this in session, we would practice a couple other ways that we might revisit these same things. Maybe we have lots of images, so we do lots of images, maybe lots of sensations, lots of those. It's unique to each person's representation of what's occurring in their nervous system at the moment, right? And it's not going to be the same for you all day, every day either. And so I think it's important to kind of just know the skills here and revisit and practice on your own. And this is just a tool to get started. This is also a tool for helpers to learn how to teach somebody else how to do it. And so, helpers, you need to know how to revisit the mechanism within here of drawing up different images repeatedly and getting creative with practicing. If things are hard to move to the container, we revisit what is the item, right? Sometimes they're hard to move to the container because it's a really, really big thing and we're trying to move a trauma or we're trying to move a part, maybe. And the nervous system is like, I can't move that because I can't forget that. If I were to forget that, maybe something bad would happen to me. So we have to make it a lot smaller to figure out what it is we are wanting or needing to move to the container. And it's okay, we have to practice. The next piece is once everything is in the container and we've done a scan and we feel like everything we've wanted to move to the container is in the container, what we do is we bring up our butterfly tapping, which is why I mentioned part one. So you're going to bring your hands up to your butterfly tapping place. You're going to scan your body, noticing if there's anything else that needs to move to the container. And if not, noticing the difference of what my body feels like right now than before I started doing my container activity. I'm going to close my eyes, and in my mind's eye, I'm going to visualize my container holding all of my things until I have the time or the space to come back to it later. And I'm also going to hold in my space the feelings and sensations I have in my body at the moment. I'm going to start a slow tap, 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 tap. And you keep going. What this does in this moment is it helps integrate the sensation of calm into your nervous system. And it also helps any leftovers to kind of find their right place and organize and integrate. And usually you would tap like this for about 60 to 90 seconds at a slow, maybe even slower than this, slow cadence. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds to do that. And then come back. And you'll have to practice some of this on your own because this is just like a skill builder. It's not the meditation per se that I would normally offer if I was doing it with clients or how I even want you to do it on your own. This is more like learn it here, take it and practice it. And so times you might use the container is that um, you might have a hard time sleeping, right? And so, like, you might wake up in the morning and you've had a bad dream and you want to put that in the container so that you're not carrying over that energy into the day. So, it's kind of like a bookend, right? It's good support for transition. Maybe I had a stressful drive at work or I have a lot of anxiety about work. So, once I get there and I get to the parking lot, I might do some tapping in some container. And then from there, I feel like, okay, now I'm reset and I'm going into work without any carryover, or I feel like I'm in a more regulated space to go to work. Something might happen while you're in that space, like I might get a text from a family member about something that's going on. And I'm like, I would love to be able to address that right now. I can't address it right now, both logistically, right? But also in my body or in my feelings. And so, how do I let my system know it's okay to set this aside and come back to it later? People will people will say things to me like, "Well, Brittany, what if it just keeps popping back up?" Yeah, I mean, there's triggers throughout the day that we might have something that's in the container and it pops back up again, right? When it pops back up, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to say, do I have the chance to address this right now? Like, can I address what's going on with me? Or is this something that I still have to set aside? In which case, I might talk to my system, talk to my inner world and be like, yeah, this is a big deal. And you really feel like it's important that this be present for us, that we acknowledge this. And I really got to focus on this thing here, right? And it doesn't mean that this thing that's popping in isn't important, but it might not be the priority in this moment or safe to do so in this moment. And so I might talk to my system and say, I think this is really important too. And because it's important, I'm going to put this in my safe space in my container. I really value the things that are in there, good or uncomfortable or otherwise, right? They are worthy of my time and my energy. And I want to give that to them when it's appropriate, right? And so I might move it to my container and do my tapping. And then later in the evening, when you have more time or space, you might say to yourself in a quite literal way, I'm going to sit down with my container and see what's all in there, what I got to finish or complete, right? Maybe I've got some stressful things in my like nervous system from earlier in the day that I want to stop and pause and revisit. Some grief, some frustration, some maybe negative self-talk that now after things have sat in the container for a little bit, I also could have maybe a little better perspective on as well. And by being able to give it my undivided attention, my body can process it and my parts can process it in a different way. And so sometimes the container is putting things off till later, is how it can feel, but also is a safe place to hold things when they're just continuous works in progress as well, right? Like in EMDR, we would use the container in between sessions for things we're reprocessing potentially to say, okay, is this a good place to stop? Yes. Okay. Let's move this to the container until we can safely return to it in the way that we may need, which signals to your nervous system like we are coming back to it. You can trust that we will spend time with it. And it also allows you to keep that promise to yourself as well with knowing like the when, the where, and the how. It may keep your nervous system and your parts from continuously throwing them back up, saying like this needs to be addressed because you've made a promise of here's when I'm going to revisit it. And then we work with ourselves to hold to the promise so that our system can trust us and we can trust our system. So I know this was a quick crash course. Like I said, I was creating this for somebody else to do a skill teacher, and I thought I might as well post it up here too. And so if you have questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, this is what it is. And so I will talk to you soon. I'll have more meditations, all sorts of things, and good luck with your container.